In the year 1940, there was a silence that hid a mass atrocity beneath pine needles and frozen soil. The Katyn massacre. Spring that year in the borderlands between the Soviet Union and occupied Poland was ordinary to the eye. But behind official doors in Moscow, a decision was taking shape. After the Soviet invasion of eastern Poland in September 1939, tens of thousands of Polish officers, policemen, intelligentsia, and civic leaders were rounded up and imprisoned. On March 5, 1940, the Soviet Politburo, its minutes later shown to carry the signatures of Joseph Stalin, Vyacheslav Molotov, and others, approved a proposal from Lavrenti Beria and the NKVD to execute a class of prisoners described as hardened and uncompromising anti-Soviet elements. Over April and May of 1940, in a series of secret shootings, roughly 22,000 Polish citizens were murdered at sites including the Katyn forest near Smolensk, Mednoye, and the NKVD's prison in Kharkiv. The bodies lay buried until April 1943, when German forces discovered mass graves at Katyn and broadcast the find to the collapsing war front. The discovery was seized as propaganda by Nazi Germany, but the forensic evidence, bullet wounds to the back of the head, documents on many victims, and the stage of decomposition pointed to killings in 1940, not later in the war. The Poles demanded an impartial inquiry. The Soviets reacted with fury. Moscow denounced the Germans' announcement as a fabrication and staged its own investigation, the so-called Burdenko Commission, which blamed the Nazis and produced a report that historians later judged shamelessly political. What followed was a decades-long international conspiracy of silence, denial, and manipulation. For the remainder of World War II and throughout the Cold War, Soviet authorities steadfastly denied responsibility. The Allied governments, aware of Soviet guilt from intelligence and diplomatic channels, but reliant on Moscow to defeat Nazi Germany, chose, in many cases, to avoid confronting the issue. The Polish government in exile demanded an independent probe. In 1943, the Soviet Union broke relations with it, accusing the Poles of collaborating with Nazi propaganda. Inside the USSR and in Soviet-dominated Poland, dissenting voices that pressed the truth were suppressed, careers destroyed, and archives sealed. The cover-up was not only verbal, it was bureaucratic and forensic. Documents were altered or withheld, forensic findings challenged by state-sponsored experts, and entire narratives rewritten in school books and press. Families of the missing were fed official lies, told that their fathers and brothers had been killed by Germans or were still alive. In Warsaw and London, lists of the dead accumulated like a slow ache, names crossed out from registers, lives erased without public accounting. For half a century, the dispute over Katyn simmered. Western historians, journalists, and surviving relatives pieced together fragments, eyewitness testimony, intercepted messages, and eventually captured Soviet documents. The breakthrough came with Glasnost and the collapse of the Soviet monopoly on memory. In April 1990, Mikhail Gorbachev's government formally acknowledged that the executions had been carried out by the NKVD on the basis of a March 1940 decision signed at the highest levels. Archives were opened. Finishers' lists, execution orders, and internal memos were released, confirming what forensic evidence had long suggested. The Katyn story is not merely an account of a wartime atrocity. It is a study in how states manufacture truth, how power silences inconvenient facts, weaponizes forensics and diplomacy, and imposes a narrative that can persist for generations. The conspiracy was not a single dramatic plot, but an institutional commitment to deny and obfuscate. Forged reports, political trials, international intimidation, and the selective release of records. Even after admission, the wounds of Katyn did not heal easily. For families, it meant late justice and complicated mourning. For nations, an awkward reconciliation with past collaborators and allies. For historians and the public, Katyn remains a cautionary tale about the costs of political expediency when truth is surrendered to strategy. Under the pines near Smolensk, the names of the dead returned to light. Proof that secrecy, however long maintained, can be pried open by patient inquiry and the slow insistence of memory.